Hello everyone. Today we are going to discuss sonnet number 146 composed by William Shakespeare. The title of the sonnet is Poor Soul, the Center of My Sinful Earth. We know that Shakespeare wrote 154 sonnets, all of which were published in the year 1609. Out of these 154 sonnets, 126 sonnets were written for the fair youth, and the remaining 28 sonnets were written to a dark lady. However, this sonnet, that is sonnet number 146, is addressed by the poet to his soul. To that extent, this is an exceptional sonnet because it does not pertain to the dark lady, even though it belongs to the latter block of 28 sonnets. Now we come to the text of this sonnet. The first stanza is like this: Poor soul, the center of my sinful earth, these rebel powers array. Why dost thou pine within and suffer dearth, painting thy outward walls so costly gay? Here it is important to note that the first line ends with the phrase my sinful earth, and the same phrase is repeated in the second line, in the starting of the second line. Now, critics have regarded this as a typographical error, which points towards the inauthenticity of the sonnets which were published as quarto edition in 1609. However, we will restrict ourselves to the text that is at hand, and we will try to interpret this with whatever information we have. So here the poet is addressing his soul, and he is addressing his soul as poor soul. It is regarded as the center of his sinful body, and it is overwhelmed by rebel powers, which obviously point towards the passions and emotions which relate to this mundane world. The poet then asks a question: Why dost thou pine within and suffer dearth, painting thy outward walls so costly gay? So, the poet is asking the soul that why does it pine within? Why does it feel the pain and suffer from dearth? Why does it starve itself? Why does the soul not fulfill itself? Painting thy outward walls so costly gay. The outward walls are symbolic of the body, and the poet says that the soul, instead of serving itself, is tolerating the outward walls being painted so colorfully, and the poet feels that it is useless to paint the outward walls in so costly a manner. It points towards beautification of our body. The poet feels that we should not pay a lot of attention towards our outward appearance, towards beautifying ourselves, towards embellishing ourselves with a lot of ornaments. Rather, the effort should be to enrich our soul. Now we come to the second stanza. Why so large cost, having so short a lease? Dost thou upon thy fading mansion spend? Shall worms, inheritors of this excess, eat up thy charge? Is this thy body's end? So, here again, the poet is stressing on the large cost and the body having so short a lease. So, these are financial metaphors which the poet is employing here. He says that our investment in our looks, our appearance, our ornaments, our beautification is very large, and our body is not immortal, it is not permanent. Its lifespan is very short. So, why are we bent upon investing so much in our body when we know that it will not last? Again, the poet says, "Dost thou upon thy fading mansion spend?" So, fading mansion again is symbolic of the body, an aging body which we are embellishing with various ornaments which we are beautifying. Shall worms, inheritors of this excess, eat up thy charge? Is this thy body's end? So, here the poet asks a rhetorical question that this body will ultimately be eaten up by worms when it is buried after death. So, it is absolutely futile to beautify it, to engage in excesses of carnal desires, of inculcating passions. So, all these things are contrary to the soul's austere demands. And the poet then says, "Then soul, live thou upon thy servant's loss." So, the poet is encouraging the soul to live, and live here means to fulfill itself, to enrich itself upon the servant's loss. That is, even though if the body is losing out on certain physical beauty or other material aspects, even though the soul should not concern itself with these mundane things or material aspects, the soul should engage in meditation, the soul should engage in finding out ways to reach the spiritual being, and let that pine to aggravate thy store by terms divine in selling hours of dross, within be fed, without be rich no more. And the poet builds on his argument. He says that the soul should concentrate upon enriching itself. It should not get affected by the pains that the body feels. The soul should buy terms divine in selling hours of dross. That is, the wasteful pursuits of the body should not be something that the soul should engage in. Instead, the soul should engage in fruitful search for meaning. The soul should search for enrichment and the absolute knowledge of truth. So, here the emphasis of the poet is to lead a life of intellectual and spiritual fulfillment instead of physical desires. And now we come to the concluding couplet. So shall thou feed on death that feeds on men, and death once dead, there's no more dying then. So the poet concludes with the thought that if the soul feeds itself, if the soul quenches its thirst of knowledge, if the soul connects with the spiritual being, then the fear of death will be overcome, because death comes once and the soul is immortal, so there will be no more dying. And with this, the poet emphasizes on the immortality of soul and the mortality of body. So, this is how the poem ends. As far as structure is concerned, like all Shakespearean sonnets, this sonnet is written in iambic pentameter, and the rhyming of the sonnet is AB AB, CD CD, EF EF, and GG. The only exception occurs in line number second, where the first phrase of "My sinful earth" is repeated, and that, as I've explained earlier, is because of inauthentic publication of Shakespearean sonnets. So, this is all about our discussion on sonnet number 146. We'll see you in our next lecture.